Well, good morning again. If you want to, you can turn in your Bibles. We're going to be in the book of Ruth. It's a little small book in the Old Testament. We're going to be in there for the next 2 weeks. I'm really excited about this. For the month of January, we've been going what we call going off topic. And what we've been doing is we've just been looking at some things that we feel like we can start our year off and get on the right track in 2020 just randomly across the Bible. We started off a couple weeks ago, and we talked about worship. And 2020 for Ramsey Heights, 2020 is the year of worship. We are going to worship through song. We're going to worship through actions. We're going to worship through prayer. Every time we come together, we are going to focus more so than ever before on God, get glory out of this service. God, get pleasure out of our worship and our heart for you. Last week, we talked about something maybe a little closer to home, is 2020 is a very hard year for arguments and politics, and how are we going to handle that in the year of 2020? How are we going to get through 2020 in a very toxic culture? This week, I wanted to go in and start in the book of Ruth, and I want to ask us a question, and I want to talk about what are we carrying into 2020 with us? What things are we carrying with us we should have left in 2019, but we refuse to let go of them? For example, I think that we all have this bag with like this luggage that we have, and we carry it around, and we it's light. I'm being dramatic. Anyway, we carry this bag around with us, and it's heavy, and it's crushing, and we carry this around with us all the time. And maybe we don't talk about it to people, but we all have this emotional weight of things that maybe have happened to us in the past, or things that we've dealt with, and we carry it crushingly, and we feel like I just can't put it down. I can't get rid of it. I have to take that with me. I'm wondering if today, if maybe we couldn't unload the bag a little bit. Maybe we can figure out what we shouldn't be carrying. Let's see what we've got in here. I've got some things in here that I think affect all of us. I know they affect me. Let's see. First one up. Yeah, this is one we all deal with. What about grudges? Do you guys carry grudges into the new year? You know, maybe there's that friend or that family member, somebody we cared about, and 2 or 3 years ago they did something, and we've just been carrying that with us. It's been on our heart. It's been bothering us. I've never really forgiven them, and in 2020, I'm going to take this out of our bag, and I'm going to lay it over to the side, and I say, I'm done with it. Let's see what else we got in here. Let's see what else we got. You know, that person, or those people that did that to us, we deserved better, didn't we? I can't believe that. It's been a few years. I'm not done with my grudges yet. I'm going to put it back in my bag. We'll carry that. We'll find something else to get out of the bag, but we're keeping our grudges because we deserve better. What about some bad effects of things that have happened in our lives? What if we made mistakes and we've suffered the consequences and we carry those with us? What if something's happened to us that's not our fault at work or with our health, and we carry this heavily all the time because we just live with this day after day after day and carry it in our little emotional bag. We can leave that to the side today. But I'm going to wake up tomorrow. We'll put that one back in the bag. That's one we can't leave alone. You know, it's hard to let stuff go, isn't it? There's got to be something else. Those are the ones we don't want to give up. The biggest one. The biggest one. Oh, yeah. Oh, it's our favorite. That thing that we carry with us from year to year. We should have left it several years ago. What about hurt? Are we carrying something that happened to us years ago and it's still in our bag, and coming into 2020, I'm just refusing to let it go of it? Maybe my parents weren't who they should have been, or maybe it was a spouse or a friend or a loved one, or maybe I lost someone and I feel cheated because they left too young, and I don't know. My hurt, it started to become a part of me, and I know I should leave it alone, but I'm going to put it back in the bag. I'm going to put it back in the bag, and I'm going to carry it right into 2020 with me because I don't know if I can get rid of it. You know, isn't that a picture of how we handle things? Like we know we have these things that we want to put away, we want to get rid of, we want to put them down, but we look at them and I don't know how to let go of what has hurt me or what has bothered me or this burden that I'm carrying. So we carry this baggage with us again and again. for the rest of today, we're going to call this baggage our brokenness. The things that have broken us, that have harmed us, that have hurt us, that weigh heavy on us. And I want us to maybe see if we can draw some inspiration for the Scripture and talk about this. We're going to leave that right there for just a second. You know, the worst part of carrying that bag around is as I look at the grudges that I hold, as I look at the bad effects of things that have happened to us in life, as we look at the hurt that we carry, we all ask the same question. And we might not admit it, but it's all went through our mind. God, where were you when I dealt with that? God, if you're so good, why is that something I'm dealing with? And that's why we can't put it down, because we don't know the answer. Well, let's look at a couple of women, actually several women, who kind of had the same thing. The book of Ruth is a story about a family. We're going to read 2 whole chapters today. We never read this much. If you're visiting with us, Bible overload today, I'm sorry. But we got a lot of story to get through, and I want to go through and learn. And I want to see how God handled the hurt of others, the grudges that others hold, the pain, the effects of their life, and all of those problems. Start with me in chapter 1, and we're just going to read verse 1 and 2, and we're going to go through 2 whole chapters of this today talking about it. Now it came to pass in the days when judges ruled that a famine was in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he, his wife, and his 2 sons. And the name of the man was Elimelech. I have practiced that all week. You guys should be proud of me. Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons was Mahlon and Chilion, a word I can't say that I practiced all week, sorry, of Bethlehem, Judah, and they came into the country of Moab and continued there. Let's talk about where this story is. We want to make sure that we get the introduction to the story taken care of, because this story is going to take us on some twists and some turns, and I think we're going to learn a lot about God and learn about carrying our baggage and carrying our brokenness with us. Well, there is a famine in the land of Israel. Chances are it's probably a punishment on the people because they have not been doing what God told them to do. So this man and his wife and his 2 children, he says, you know, we've got to get out of here. Now, you and I in America, we live in a land of plenty, don't we? There may have been times when we didn't have as much as we wanted or even as much as we needed, but I have never felt like I needed to leave Batesville, Arkansas because there's not enough food to feed the people here. We don't understand famine the way it's put in this book, but the original author of this book and the original people who read this, they would have understood gut-wrenching hunger. And even if you had money, you didn't have the money or you didn't have the ability to buy because nothing was for sale to eat. And so Elimelech and his wife Naomi, they said, let's get out of here. Let's leave Israel and go to another country and see if there's food there. Maybe they've had more rain. Maybe the crops have been better. And so they walk out of Israel. Now, to put this in context, they're leaving their home. But more than leaving their home, they're Israelites, and they're leaving what God had called and promised to them as the promised land. This is the land that when God took the Israelites out of Egypt, He guided them to and said, this is yours. And so to the original reader that reads the story, they're looking at this, and these people said, God, I don't trust this place that you brought me to. And in effect, what they're saying is God, I don't trust you. And so they left where God told them to be. They left the promised land, and they went looking for something better. Let's continue in the story, verse 3 here. And Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. Don't skip over that verse. It's a long book. It's 4 chapters. Don't skip over that. A woman, a single mother, burying her husband with 2 small children. And they took the wives of women of Moab, and the name of one was Orpah, and the other was Ruth, and they dwelled there about 10 years. And Mahlon and Chilion died also, both of them. And the woman was left of her 2 sons and her husband. And she arose with her daughters-in-law, and she might return to the country of Moab. For she had heard in the country of Moab how the Lord had visited his people in giving them bread. Wherefore she went forth out of the place where she was, and her 2 daughters-in-law with her, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. Well, the story started out bad enough. There's a famine, but here you have this woman named Naomi, and she's got a husband, and she has 2 children, and she's happy, and she's fulfilled, and life is a little bit hard, but really, she has her desire. She has people to love. And on this journey, she's in a strange land when suddenly, and the Bible doesn't tell us how, her husband died. And now you have a woman with no way to protect herself, no way to care for herself, in a land where she doesn't belong with 2 small children, and she's doing the single mom thing by herself. Can you imagine the darkness she must have dealt with over the years? Can you imagine the brokenness? Can you imagine the bag she carried of everything? But then there was a little bit of joy. The boys grew up and they grew into strong men, and she took pride in watching them, and she smiled as she watched and saw the men they were becoming. And like all young men do, they fell in love with two beautiful women. And so there was a moment in the story where they're sitting at a wedding, and Naomi has to be sitting in the back smiling, looking at her sons happy and celebrating their wedding. In the back of her head, I bet you she thought to herself, I wish my husband was here to see this. I'm so glad they've made it. I'm so glad they're happy. Maybe things are going to look up. And she did that 2 times with both sons. And then the story doesn't tell us how, but within a few years, both of her sons have died. We now have 3 widows alone in Moab. One of them who not only had buried her husband, but had buried her 2 sons. You want to talk about brokenness today? You want to talk about the things that we carry with us? Naomi had that. She's living in a very dark world, and now she has to ask herself this question: What do I do now? Where do I go? I don't belong here. I can't take care of myself. You've got to understand at this time, the worst thing that could ever happen to you was to be a childless widow. That was the bottom of the social rung. That was, you were the outcast. Everybody looked down on you. Maybe somebody might have pity on you and give you enough to eat so you didn't starve to death. Maybe. But nobody loved you, and nobody took care of you, and nobody cared about you. And you couldn't work for yourself because the men worked, and you're just stuck. Naomi comes up with a plan. What are we going to do? Verse 8. And Naomi said unto her 2 daughters-in-law, Go, return each to her mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you as ye have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant you that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. And she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. Listen to the pain here. Naomi's saying, leave me. I accept my fate. I accept my future. But you ladies, y'all are young and you're pretty. Go home to your families and marry again. Go get married again, and I'm just going to be alone. And you got to think about this. These 2 daughters-in-law with their mother-in-law. I can't leave you. And they're all crying together. And Naomi said, and when they said to her, Surely we will return with thee unto thy people. And Naomi said, Turn again, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Are there yet more sons in my womb, that there may be husbands? Turn again, my daughters. Go your way. For I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, if I should have a husband also tonight, and should also bear sons, will ye tarry for them till they were grown? Would you stay for them, my husbands, for having husbands? Nay, my daughters, for it grieveth me much for your sakes. Listen to what she says. That the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. See, we see Naomi carrying her baggage, and what's the question she's asking? Where was God when my husband died? Where was God when my sons died? Where was God when I was hungry and there was no food? He's not paying attention to me. And they lifted up their voice and wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law. But Ruth clave unto her. And she said, Behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back unto her people and unto her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law. And Ruth said, Entreat me not to leave thee, or return them following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thou God my God. Listen, where thou diest, I will die. And there will I be buried. The Lord do so unto me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me. When she saw that she steadfastly minded to go with her, then she left speaking unto her. Listen to what's going on in this story. Naomi makes a decision. I'm going home. And she calls her daughters in there and she says, Listen, you have options. You have choices. Go home and marry again. And the daughters both say, No. The daughters-in-law say, No, we're staying with you. And she said, Listen, here's the thing. If you stay with me, you're never going to have a husband again. You're going to be just like me. No children and widows for the rest of your life. And in this society, what would happen is that if a husband died, her brother or his brother would marry his wife so that could be passed on, so that woman would not go on without having someone to care for her. And she says, I don't have sons to give you. It says, even if I had a husband and I got pregnant tonight, you've got like 18 years of waiting for this kid to grow up, and then he's going to be that much younger than you, and you couldn't marry him. And you have to go find your husbands. And they all cried together because they were being split up. And the 2 daughters-in-law, we see 2 different hearts of them. One of them cried, and she loved, but she loved without action. She said, I love you, but it didn't take a lot of pushing for her to say, okay, you go deal with that and I'll take care of myself. But Ruth was special. Ruth told Naomi, said, no, I'm married into your family, and I'm here to be with you and take care of you no matter what. And Naomi said, no, and you can't go with me. And Ruth said, I'm going, and I'm not leaving, and where you die, I will die. And this is more than a declaration of like, we'll die, you'll die in a few years, and like 30 years down the road, I'll be buried close to you. This is literally a declaration. If you go and you starve to death because nobody takes care of you, I'm going to starve to death beside you. We see a difference in these two daughters, and there's something interesting. We have a whole book named after the one who had heart with actions, who had love with actions, and we never hear from Orpah again, who left. So she made the decision, I choose to go with you. I will even serve your God. And we have these two women, widowed, traveling back to Israel. Read with me at verse 19. So when the two went and came to Bethlehem, and it came to pass when they were come to Bethlehem, that all the city moved about them and said, is this Naomi? And she said unto them, call me not Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty hath dealt bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord hath brought me home again empty. Why then call ye me Naomi, seeing the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty hath afflicted me? So Naomi and Ruth and the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, in which they returned from the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem in the beginning of the barley harvest. Look at what happens. Bethlehem is a small community, and here comes Naomi, who had left with a husband and two children. She had left with everything she wanted in search of a better life, and she comes back with nothing but a daughter-in-law from a foreign land, a nobody. Nothing, no money, no place to live. And people run up to her and go, Naomi, is that you? Are you back? What happened? Where's everything going? And they keep saying, Naomi, Naomi, Naomi. And she says, listen, she said, don't call me Naomi anymore. And a tear rolls down her face. And she says, you can call me Mara. I don't want to be called Naomi. See, the word Naomi, and everybody would have understood it. Names have meanings. When you name someone, it usually has a meaning behind it. The word Naomi means pleasant. And so they kept running up to her and saying, hey, pleasant, hey, happy, hey, joyful, hey, Naomi. And she said, that's not who I am anymore. You can call me Mara, which means bitter. Because I had everything, and did you see what she said? And God brought me back here, and God took it all away. She's asking this question. She's bitter and she's upset, and she's so hurt that her hurt is becoming part of her identity. Don't call me happy. I'm upset and I'm bitter. I'm hurt and I'm broken, and that's who I am now, and don't you dare say anything kind to me. Don't you dare try to remind me that life is supposed to be good. Let me ask you a question. Do you see a little bit of yourself in Naomi in any little thing? Do you have a hurt or a brokenness that you hang on to that you feel like is becoming a part of you? Maybe it's even becoming part of your identity, that this is who I am. I'm hurt. I've messed up, or I've had something done to me, or something wasn't fair to me in life. I'm broken, and that's just part of who I am now. That's how Naomi was. Hurt. She had no purpose. She had no joy, and she keeps saying again and again, and God did this to me. God brought me back here. I know what you're saying. I see your faces. Brian, this is a horrible story. Moving on to the happy part. Pick a different book. This is sad. And some of you got like tears rolling down your face. The only reason I'm not crying is I cried when I was studying. We've all been there to some degree, where we felt broken, where we felt cheated, where we felt like Naomi, and we asked this question. And so if it was up to me and you, we would just stop the story right there. I can't take any more of three women hurting this badly. I can't take visualizing a woman crying as she's lost everything she loved. But if we stopped right here, we would miss the next chapter. Because see, God had a next chapter for Naomi, and God had a next chapter for Ruth. And listen to me, with our baggage and our brokenness, God has a next chapter for me and you after our brokenness. And we look at this and we say, well, how can you take someone like Naomi? How can you take someone who is that broken, who is identified as their hurt, who is identified as their brokenness, and say, that can be fixed? Naomi will always be broken. She lost children and a husband. Many of us have dealt with loss. You don't get better. Maybe life gets a little easier, but it's always that crack. How do you deal with the stuff that we've done, and how do you say, Brian, you can fix this, or God can fix this? Well, I think maybe the best illustration is a form of Japanese art. There's a Japanese art form called kintsugi. And what they'll do is when you have a clay pot and you drop it, or it falls off the counter, or your kid kicks it and it breaks, they'll pick up all the pieces, broken as they are, and those pieces will never fit back together exactly right again. Those cracks are always going to be visible. But they'll take a glue and they'll sprinkle in it gold or silver, and they'll glue that pot back with all of those cracks right where they are, but they're accented by something beautiful. And so we take this useless pot that was broken, and you add value to it and you put it back together, and that brokenness actually makes it more valuable. That clay pot that would have been thrown in the trash now lasts 1,000 years as people put it in museums and marvel at it. And not because the cracks are gone, but because you can see how beautiful the cracks are. That's God's plan for your and my brokenness when we deal with something that we can't handle. That's His plan for what He wants to do in our life. The brokenness doesn't go away. The cracks don't go away. But God has this amazing ability to take something broken, take something ugly, and make it beautiful. You know what makes that pot, that little nothing clay pot that somebody made on a Saturday afternoon, worth something? It's two things. Number one is that first it was broken. And number two, the hands of a skillful craftsman put it back together. You know what makes me and you valuable when we're broken? Is that we go through something and then the hands of a skillful God puts us back together and makes it beautiful. There's beautifulness to be found in brokenness, although it may not always seem like that. And so God plans for us to come to Him broken, but we never ever go away empty. We may go away with scars, but the scars become beautiful. And this is what's going to happen to Naomi. Are you guys ready for a happier chapter? That was a hard one, if you really think about the story. But look at what God's doing. The plan starts to come together in chapter 2. So if you'll read with me in chapter 2, verse 1. Listen to what happens here. Naomi and Ruth, they come back. It gives us a time period right at the barley harvest. I don't know why that's important just yet, but it's going to become important. Naomi's sad. She's broken. She's becoming her identity. She's carrying her brokenness around. Verse 1. And Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's, a mighty man of wealth of the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabitess said unto Naomi, Let me go into the field and glean ears of corn after him, in whose sight I shall find grace. And she said unto her, Go, my daughter. And she went and came and gleaned in the field after the reapers, and her hap was to light on the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was the kindred of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said unto his reapers, The Lord be with you. And they answered, The Lord bless thee. Then said Boaz to his servant that was over the reapers, Listen, whose damsel is this? I love Boaz. He comes in and you see a spark immediately. He's there, he's talking to his workers, and he looks at them and goes, Hey, who's that girl? What's she doing here? She's kind of cute. Who is she? Let's continue on and see what happens. And the servant that was set over the reapers answered and said, It is the Moabitish damsel that came back with Naomi out of the country of Moab. Listen to how he says this. It is the person from Moab who came from Moab. He's making a good point. She's from Moab. Just so you know, it's not somebody from around here. In Arkansas term, we'd say, she ain't from around here. That's what he's saying. She's not one of us. She's from a foreign country, and here she is. And then verse 7, And she said, I pray you, let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. So she came, and hath continued even from the morning until now. And she tarried a little in the house. So let's talk about this story and what all this means. There's a lot of things going on here. As they come back to this small community, you have to eat. It is a function of the human body. We have to eat every single day. And yet here we have these two women with no job, no money, no husbands, no place to live, and no food. How are they going to get their food? And so Ruth goes out and she says, I'm going to glean these fields. And what this means is that after the reapers come through, after they come through and cut the barley harvest, and some of you may have done this back in the day, you take like a scythe and you cut the hay and leave it to the side. Anything that was dropped or anything that was missed, if there was a blade of barley left there, she comes behind them and she cuts it down and she puts it in a basket and she carries it home. And maybe after a full day's worth of work, maybe I have something enough to maybe make a biscuit. Just enough to have something to eat today. There wasn't a lot to be done here. This is what this is what Ruth is doing. And you notice how the guy talks about her. When Boaz says, Hey, who's the girl? The guy makes a point to say, she doesn't belong here. She's basically begging. She's poor. She's a widow. She's come here to take the extra that we left. You can kind of feel the disdain in his voice. And this is what it tells you about Ruth and Naomi, is they were outcast in their own new home. They were from another country. They didn't have anything. They were looked down upon. They were despised. And so if that's how the guy who was over the field, if that's how the guy that was over the field looks at her, why is he letting her get food? Why would he tolerate her there, basically begging and getting the extra and taking the scraps off the table, if you will? Well, see, in Deuteronomy and once again in Leviticus, there's some commands to the Israelites about how to harvest your food. In verse 19 of Deuteronomy 24, it says, "When thou cuttest down thine harvest in thy field, and hast forgot a sheaf," that's part of what you've cut down, thou shalt not go again and fetch it. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow, that the Lord God may bless thee in all the work of thy hands. See, God had put in the Bible, in the laws of how the country was supposed to work, when you go out and you harvest your barley field, don't get too close to the edges. Leave a little bit extra out there. If you mess up and miss something, leave it there and somebody will come pick it up. If you're carrying something and drop it, leave it there for somebody to find and eat. And this is how Ruth and Naomi were getting their food. But you know something about Ruth, who was a widow and who was a stranger, as the Bible puts it, is before Ruth was a widow, before Ruth was married, before Ruth was born, God had made a plan to take care of Ruth in her brokenness and her time of need. God has not forgotten brokenness. God has not forgotten hurt. God has not forgotten us when we're imperfect. God has not forgotten us when we feel forgotten about. God had made a special place for Ruth. See, the people of the country, they looked at Ruth and they said, she's an outcast because she's broken. But God looked at her and said, she's special because she's broken. Nowhere in the Bible does it say, hey, leave a little extra food for your neighbor Jimmy. It says, leave extra food for the broken. Leave extra food for the people who have none. And this is how Ruth is getting her food. And Boaz looks at Ruth, and unlike everybody else in the field, Boaz looks at Ruth and goes, I feel the same way about her that God does. Let's look what Boaz does. You can start to see a little bit of flirting going on. Verse 8. Then said Boaz unto Ruth, hearest thou not, my daughter? Go not to glean in another field, neither go from hence, and abide here fast by my maidens. Let thine eyes be on the field, that they do not reap, and go thou after them. Have I not charged the young men, that they shall not touch thee? And when thou art athirst, go into the vessels, and drink of them which are of the young men have drawn. And then she fell on her face, and bowed herself to the ground, and said unto him, Why have I found grace in thine eyes, that thou shouldest take knowledge of me, seeing I'm a stranger? Look at what Ruth says. She's so broken. Somebody's trying to help her, and she even goes, why would you do this? I'm a nobody. I'm a stranger. I'm a widow and I'm broken. Why would you care for me like this? Verse 11. And Boaz answered and said unto her, It hath been fully showed to me all that thou hast done unto thy mother-in-law since the death of thine husband, and that how thou hast left thy father and thy mother in the land of thy nativity, and art come to the people which thou knowest not thenceforth. The Lord recompense thy work, and a full reward is given thee to the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings thou art come to trust. Then she said, Let me find favor in thy sight, Lord, my Lord. For thou hast comforted me, and for that thou hast spoken friendly unto thine handmaid, though I not be unto one of thine handmaidens. Look at what she's saying. You're being kind to me, and I don't deserve it. You're with me. There's an amazing picture here. Ruth is got nothing. She's gleaning in the field for just enough to survive. And yet here comes Boaz, who is willing to give her more. He starts providing for her immediately. He tells her, he says, work with my young ladies. And for Ruth, an outcast, she now has companionship. He tells her, I told the men to leave you alone. They're not to flirt with you. They're not to bother you. You are safe in my field. And so he provides for her protection. And he says, and when you are thirsty, you can go to my vessels and you can get water. All the things that Ruth didn't have was given to her by Boaz. There's an amazing picture here between Ruth and Boaz. Ruth is broken in every way imaginable. Much like you and I are broken in this world. Broken in sin that we all commit, that we're all imperfect. With no help, we're needy, we can't take care of ourselves. And then Boaz is a picture of God. He has abundance and he gives. He has extra and he loves to serve with it. He is willing to, and sacrificial in all times, and there's no better picture of that than what Jesus Christ did on the cross for us. Did you know that Jesus Christ died for your sins? He died for your pain. He died for your hurt. He died for your sickness. He died for you so that he could love you more completely. There's a picture of that, of what Ruth and Boaz do here. I know we've been doing a lot, guys. Almost done with the Bible reading. Verse 14 here. Listen carefully. And Boaz said unto her, At mealtime come thou hither, and eat of the bread, and dip thy morsel in the vinegar. And she sat beside the reapers, and he reached her parched corn. And she did eat, and was sufficed, and left. And when she was risen up to glean, Boaz commended his young men, saying, Let her glean even among the sheaves, and reproach her not. Look, as she's walking out, she has this meal with Boaz, and you can kind of see she's twirling her hair and going, boy, this guy's really nice. And he's kind of trying to help her out, but he's probably a little scared of her. And as she walks out, he hits the guy next to him and says, look, she'll be back. As she's gleaning, he says this. Listen to what he tells him. And let fall also some handfuls of purpose for her, and leave them that she may glean them, and rebuke her not. He says, listen, while you're out working, I want you to purposely drop some stuff that she can find. Give her extra. Don't just leave what you're commanded to leave. Don't just do what you're commanded to do. When she's not looking, do more for her. That's how God looks for us. Did you know that when you're not looking for God, he is still looking out for you? When you're not hoping God's going to do anything, he's still making things happen. And we fall into this, what we might call luck. And we say, oh, well, that was lucky, or that was good, or I don't know what I would have done without that. It has the fingerprints of God all over it. And she took it up and went to the city, and her mother-in-law saw that she had gleaned, and she brought forth and gave to her that she had reserved after she was sufficed. And her mother-in-law, who was her mother-in-law? Naomi, right? So here's Naomi. Listen to this change in Naomi. And Naomi said unto her, Where hast thou gleaned today? And where wroughtest thou? Blessed be he that did take knowledge of thee. And she showed her mother-in-law with whom she had wrought, and said, The man's name with whom I wrought this day is Boaz. And Naomi said unto her daughter-in-law, Blessed be he of the Lord, who hath not left his kindness to the living and to the dead. And Naomi said unto her, This man is near of kin unto us, and one of our next kinsmen. And Ruth the Moabitess said, He has said also, Thou shalt keep thy fast by thy young men until they have ended the harvest. And Naomi said unto Ruth, her daughter-in-law, It is good, my daughter, that thou goest out with the maidens, and that thou meet thee not in any other field. So she kept fast by the maidens of Boaz to glean unto the end of the barley harvest. And, here's something new, and of the wheat harvest, and dwelt with her mother-in-law. So Ruth has this bit of a moment with Boaz where they're together. Boaz is really helping her, and he actually invites her. He said, you're out here begging, you're out here just getting the at least a little bit. Why don't you come to the house and eat lunch with us, with all of the workers, with all of the reapers? Come eat, and we'll give you enough food that you can have a really good lunch and you can be completely full. They sit there and they have this conversation, and she eats until she is satisfied, and then she leaves while Boaz gives instructions. Make sure that there is plenty of extra for her to pick up. Make sure that there is plenty more that she can get. And as she leaves, she takes with her harvest enough grain to last them several days. Now listen carefully. Ruth, who was broken and an outcast, ate at the table of a wealthy master. That's not something that happens very often. Very few times does someone who is a broken outcast get invited to sit at the table of the master, to have plenty, to have more than they need. And Naomi comes back and she tells Naomi this, and this is such a huge story, that Naomi, who keeps saying, God did this to me, God made me hurt, God made me broken, Naomi says, blessed be God who did this to us. God is starting to come together, and you start to see this picture of what's going to happen in chapters 3 and 4. You'll have to come back next week if you want to know that. You can start to see this picture of what God is doing and putting it together. And I think for the first time, Naomi sees this. See, they came into this land empty, but now they're full. They go from having an existence where they starve, and they have an abundance. But let me say this to you. None of the story that's about to happen, spoiler alert, Ruth marries Boaz. It's like a Hallmark movie. It's a beautiful story. None of it happens if Ruth had not went and sat at the table with Boaz. She made a choice that she's willing to receive the help. And I kind of wonder for you and me, if maybe with our brokenness, maybe with the things that we deal with, if possibly God invites us to the table and says, come, you're empty, let me make you full. Come, you're broken, let me mend you, we say no. God says, give me your brokenness, and we grab a hold of it and we say, no, God, it's mine. I'm going to carry it into 2020. And we hold it so tight because we're scared we're going to lose it. And God's saying, if you'll just give it to me, I'll make something beautiful out of it. If we could have the musicians, please. Today, I want us all to go home with a different heart. There's not a person in this room, not to your left, not to your right, not standing on the stage, who didn't come in here carrying some degree of brokenness, some pain, some grudge, some hurt, something that we're carrying and struggling with, and the weight of it is crushing us, and God is begging us. He said, if you will just give it to me, if you will sit at the table, He says, I have a plan for it. This morning, I want to invite you to unload your bag and leave those boxes up here at the altar.